Hey there guys, so I'm back with another review. Now, in my last movie review, I said that I would do or that I was thinking of doing a review for a boxing movie. Now, as I've said a few times on here, I'm not a big fan of boxing movies. Obviously, I'm a big fan of boxing. I mean, my channel is a boxing channel, and that's what I primarily focus on this channel. But I figured, boxing movies for me, it's just something I've never really been able to get into. I just find them, for the most part, really overly dramatic, overly unrealistic. For example, I'm not a big fan of the Rocky movies. First one was okay, didn't like any of the others. I just think that a lot of boxing movies, even boxing movies that are based on true stories, like Bleed for This, for example, which came out quite recently, didn't like that movie at all. Didn't like Grudge Match. I like martial arts movies and action movies. I'm just not a big fan of boxing movies for whatever reason. I've just never been able to get into them. But I figured I'd review a boxing movie. And the movie I've decided to review, because I wanted to review more of an obscure boxing movie rather than a popular one, I decided to review this movie, Max Schmeling, which came out in 2010, which is, as you guys probably know, about the German fighter Max Schmeling. Now, um, one of the things about this movie that immediately, I would say that it stands out immediately, and it's an immediate turn off. It's something that would really, it's an immediate negative about this movie, that would turn a lot of people away from it. This movie was directed by Uwe Boll. Now, for those of you who don't know who Uwe Boll is, for those of you who do know who he is more like, you'll know that he is one of the worst directors, or he's widely recognized, and he's actually notorious for being one of the worst directors of all time. His movies are some of the worst movies you'll ever come across. Like his entire portfolio of movies. I think anybody who is familiar with his work would agree that most would stay away from his work. I mean, his movies are just insensitive. They're poorly written, poorly directed. They tend to be quite poorly put together. They tend to be quite choppy, and most of his movies are just pieces of shit, to be honest. So that's an immediate turn off right there. That this movie, which is about one of the more popular athletes in the history of Germany, to be directed by somebody like Uwe Boll, it's a bit of a turn off. But either way, how is this movie? Is this movie a piece of shit, or is this movie good? To be honest, as far as boxing movies go, now this movie has quite a few problems, which I will get into. There are some issues with the movie which I think that a lot of critics picked up on, and rightfully so, and I will talk about them. But honestly, there's a few things about this movie which is, as far as boxing movies go, I think that a few things about it were actually pretty good. Honestly, um, for one, the cinematography and the set pieces in this movie are really good. It certainly they certainly did do quite a good job of sort of recreating that whole 1930s, 1940s feel. The movie looks authentic. The way that the characters dress, the way that they look, the way that the backgrounds look, the way that the set pieces look, it actually does look quite authentic. And it is a very good looking movie, I have to say that. And one of the things that kind of blew me away about this movie and surprised me is that, this is something that, again, it's always an issue of mine with boxing movies, but this one actually set itself apart, and that is the action sequences and the fight choreography in this film was surprisingly good. I have to say, particularly the battle between Joe Louis and Max Schmeling, the first fight, the way that it was choreographed, I thought it was done really good, because a lot of boxing movies have this problem where they add like ridiculous sound effects. They have a lot of like choppy edits. They have a lot of close-ups. Like if any of you guys saw Creed, for example, I mean the fight choreography in that film was fucking atrocious. It was some of the worst I've ever seen. Like it was all close-ups, and you could barely see what was going on. It was ridiculous. But in this movie, there's quite a lot of wide shots, and yeah, I think the choreography was actually quite good here, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that there are quite a few professional boxers who actually act in this movie. Now that does become a negative later on, and I will get to that, believe me. But yeah, I thought the fight choreography was quite good. There's also a particular training sequence in this movie which I liked, where Max Schmeling is training for his first battle against Joe Louis, and it shows some of the technical side of things where he was looking to kind of exploit a hole in Joe Louis's defense where he could land his right hand, which is something that obviously Max Schmeling did in real life. You know, he was able to find a home for his counter right hand over the top. So I liked how they went into that. I liked the musical score. The musical score in the training sequence was very good. It was actually one of my favourite sequences in the movie. Was the training sequence. I thought that was quite good. Usually I don't like training sequences in boxing films, but in this one I did. I thought it was really good. But yeah, let's get into some of the problems with this movie. Now, one of the issues that the critics picked up on immediately was the issue with the acting. Now, the decision from the director to cast Henry Maske as Max Schmeling. Now, any of you know who don't know who Henry Maske is, he was a professional boxer from the 90s. He was a light heavyweight world champion for a while. He was quite popular in Germany. He wasn't a great fighter, but he was decent. You know, he was a good, tall, athletic boxer. And yeah, he had a very successful career. He also made a brief comeback in 2007, so which was not long before this movie was filmed, actually. So yeah, you know, this movie, they got him while he was still in shape to film this movie, and it was, like I said, it was filmed pretty well. The action sequences and whatnot I had no problem with, but the problem is the acting. Max Schmeling had never acted before this. He's not an actor. Okay, the guy's a boxer, and he had no training, as far as I know, you know, in drama and whatnot. And neither did most of the actors in this movie. I mean, they hired people. They hired, for example, Johan Pablo Hernandez, the former cruiserweight champion from Cuba. They hired him to play Joe Louis, and again, like he didn't really have much to go with. I mean, he was okay in the action sequences he was in, but his acting, you could tell it wasn't up to scratch. There wasn't very good dialogue in the movie. The dialogue that was pretty good in the movie, I mean, it was all just so monotoned. It was also one-paced, if you know what I mean. It was all one pace. Like, everything was said with the exact same demeanor and the exact same tone. Like it was being read from a script. You could tell it was a movie. It wasn't natural at all. You know, you could tell it was being read from a script. It was, you know, it was as if they said, all right, this is your line, read it out, and then you're done. Facial expressions were always the same. There was no drama. There was no emotion whatsoever, even in like volatile situations. Like there's like rioting in the street in one scene, and like, you know, the characters are all just completely calm, and you know, Henry Maske is completely calm, and I just didn't buy his performance at all. Interestingly enough, in the DVD extras for this movie, in the special features, Uwe Boll talked, who was the director, he talked about the decision to cast Henry Maske in the movie, and the reason why is because, well, he claimed that Henry Maske had some of the same demeanor and some sort of the same personality as Max Schmeling. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But he also talked about he kind of looks like Max Schmeling and is a similar sort of size and has a similar sort of physique, which I do agree. I think that he does kind of resemble him a little bit, and obviously the fact that he knew how to box, that was a bonus for him being in the movie. So I get what they were going for. I get why they hired him to be in the movie. I get it. I get why they did it, but I just don't think it really worked. I mean, it would have been much better if they'd have had a much more experienced actor to take on a role like that. So I get why the critics didn't like it. Also, the movie isn't very well paced. And I understand this again. This is another problem I have with boxing movies. That they never seem to be paced properly. They're always too long. Like, I don't give a shit about a love story between Rocky and Adrian in the Rocky movies. I don't watch movies for that shit. I don't give a shit about all these slow sequences where they're walking through the street with the sad music playing, and this movie has all that same shit, man. All the drama between Max Schmeling and his wife, and I just don't care about that shit, man. I want to know about the boxing. I want to see action. I want to know about his conflict outside of the ring too, whatever conflicts they had, and there was just a lot of sequences in this movie which were just drawn out and focused on the wrong things. And again, it was a little bit more well paced than some of the other boxing movies, like the Rocky movies or like Creed, which was a pile of shit. I hated that movie. I would watch this over that any day. I would watch this over, like I said, I would watch this over Bleed for This, another really poorly paced movie. But to be honest, guys, this movie, again, it just has a few of those same issues that boxing movies have. And to be honest, like I said, the acting wasn't great. It wasn't really memorable. There wasn't really a memorable performance acting-wise from any of the characters or any of the actors. I mean, the lady who plays Max Schmeling's wife, I can't remember the actress's name. She does a fairly decent job. But everybody else in the movie, I just didn't buy it. Again, there was a lot of... I don't really want to say propaganda, but it was like, there was a lot of shit with the Nazis and trying to make you hate the Nazis, and Max Schmeling was so hard done by the Nazis. I mean, whatever. There was one scene which I did like, which was quite sad, where because there's a scene earlier after he beats Joe Louis and he comes back to Germany, and he he's getting off the plane, and there's all these people, like thousands of people, waiting to celebrate him and to greet him home. But then when he loses and he comes back, there's nobody waiting for him. Like he's completely forgotten about. Like it's the realities of failure in a sport like boxing. When you win, everybody loves you, but when you fail, people abandon you. Fan bases abandon their fighters when they lose, and that does happen. And I know that obviously he boxed during the war, and that had a lot of a negative effect on his his public appearances and all that. Obviously, a lot of people hated him because he was associated with the Nazis and whatnot. And they portrayed that quite well in the movie. But again, I just thought that could have been explored a little bit more, and there could have been a few more action sequences, and we could have seen a few more fights rather than focusing on a love story and this, that, and the other. The movie had its issues. It did. I'm not gonna lie. I can get why certain critics didn't like it. But as far as boxing movies go, I enjoyed this movie. I would give it an average score of 6 out of 10, maybe even 7 out of 10. I don't think it's a great movie, but it's a movie that I would certainly watch again. I certainly would. In fact, I've seen it twice, so yeah, I did watch it again. So yeah, I'm not a fan of boxing movies, guys. I've never been a fan of boxing movies. This isn't a great movie. But it's certainly a movie. I mean, for an Uwe Boll film, this is the only film from him I've ever enjoyed. I've got to say that. So it's not a great movie. It's an average movie. It's a movie I can watch. If you like boxing, I don't see why you wouldn't like this movie. It's a heck of a lot better than the Muhammad Ali movie with Will Smith. That was a pile of garbage for the most part. That was just boring. I would say I liked Raging Bull a little bit more than this. That was more of because there was a lot of action in that movie. But yeah, it wasn't a great movie. It was average, but I enjoyed it. So let me know what you guys think about this one. And yeah, I've been doing a lot of movie reviews. Soon I promise you guys I'll get back to the boxing videos. But there's not a lot of fights that are coming up in recent weeks that I'm interested in. So either way, let me know what you guys think, and thanks for watching.